Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here this morning. This morning we're going to launch and we are going to rank the happiest countries in the world. And then we're going to have a brief discussion about it. But before I jump into it, I want to say one thing, which is why do we do this in the first place? You know, if you look back at history over the past few hundred years, states, economists, statisticians have tried to count virtually everything that we do. It's how we have amazing statistics like unemployment or GDP or life expectancy. But in this process, they forgot to count one thing. They forgot to count how people feel. And today, we are trying to fix that problem with this report, the World Happiness Report. And the way that we did it is that every single year Gallup goes out and we ask a question where we ask almost 150,000 people to tell us, rate your life on a scale of 0 to 10, where 0 is the worst possible life and 10 is the best possible life. Where do you stand today? And the lengths at which we go in order to do that, in 1/3 of the world's countries, about 30 to 40 of them, we call everyone. But in the other 100, we're doing face-to-face interviews in almost every corner of the planet. That is the voices that are represented in the report today. So, what did they tell us? Out of the over 140 countries of which we surveyed, again, all we did was average one question, 0 to 10. Here are the top 30. The first one, oh, it's already behind me. 30th is Singapore, all the way up to 21 is Slovenia. The reason that this ranking is really important is because the United States and Germany for the first time fell out of the top 20. And John Helliwell will get into this a little bit, but one of the big reasons that the United States dropped out of the top 20 is because young people in America are rating their lives lower than they ever have before. The next one, the two countries, Czechia and Lithuania, are two of the countries that joined the top 20 after the US and Germany fell out. Here are the next 5. You'll see that there is an interesting country in that list, which is Israel. Remember, when you look at these data, remember that when we do the rankings, it is a 3-year rolling average. So last year when we did our survey in Israel, it was after October 7th, and we saw one of the largest declines that we've ever seen in the history of our database on this life evaluation metric. Here are the last 5. Sweden is number 4. Of course, we have the ambassador here today to maybe tell us what the secret is. Number 2 is Denmark, and number 1, we're joined by the ambassador, again, is Finland, the happiest country in the world. So let's start there. Ambassador, thank you for joining us, and congratulations on being known as the happiest country in the world. Is there a secret, and if so, what is it?
There is, but I will not tell you, obviously. First of all, I think if you ask a Finn on the street, are you the happiest person on earth, or is this the happiest nation on earth? I think they mostly are quite surprised. And of course now, after 7 years of consistent winning in this sort of survey, I think it kind of starts to hit home that we must be doing something right. But I think it's going to still take like 20 years of consistent wins until we'll start to fully believe that this is the case. So it's a kind of, but I think fundamentally there are no secret sources to this. I think if you take one key reason, I think it's the trust in the institutions. Like most of the people feel that the system is democratic, it gives you a sufficient degree of freedom, but it also supports and protects you, and it kind of works as it's supposed to work. So this is the kind of the basic level of and most Finns, to be honest, I mean on average, I think the life is relatively stress-free. So you don't have this kind of big concerns that people in many places actually do have. So it kind of removes part of the anxiety away. Then you have, of course, easy access to nature, which is something that people in many countries have to pay a lot. For us, it's like you can almost have your own private lake if you want to. So it's kind of it gives you a kind of a freedom and sense of possibilities, which I think show up in the survey.
there's a famous quote by one of your ministers, and the minister was asked about these happiness rankings, and the minister said back, "If Finland is the happiest country, then I feel sorry for all the other countries." Is there a frustration that's caused by these rankings throughout Finland?
I think we started to get a bit nervous before this game because, I mean, it's been 2 years of horrible war in Ukraine. We happen to share the 832 miles of common border with our neighbor Russia, which is doing the attack. So obviously I was kind of expecting that this kind of situation would somehow affect the numbers, but no, it seems to be the case that we are kind of able to sort of continue mostly the normal life we have. I think it was a Danish philosopher, Søren Kierkegaard, who once said that people settle for a level of despair they can tolerate and call it happiness. So I don't know if it was a Danish philosopher, and Danes are number 2. So, but I guess people have also some stamina and kind of inner strength to kind of withstand these conditions. So that's also part of. I mean, happiness cannot be a kind of. You cannot be crazy happy all the time. It has to be kind of something deeper, which kind of helps you also through the testing times, which we are all facing now.
Jon, I want to come to you. Jon is the person that's been the lead author of this report since it started over a decade ago. Jon, this is a tough question, but if Finland ranks number 1 every single year, why should we do this in the first place?
Why?
Why?
Why is Finland number 1, or why do we? What's the question?
If Finland is number 1 every single year, are we learning anything new?
Oh, absolutely. What you learn, the very first report came out in 2012 in order to support the UN high-level meeting on happiness and well-being following the Bhutan-sponsored resolution in 2011. And the whole point was to explain the science. And we did, in fact, list countries in a variety of surveys, of which the Gallup World Poll was the broadest. And I didn't want to put rankings in. I said it's wrong to think about happiness as something where there are winners and losers and top and bottom. The whole point is you can be happier without anybody else being less happy. So it's not a competition. And even now, we're very explicit about it. We realize that a lot of people come to the report because of the rankings, wanting to know how they do and how it's life in other countries. They realize these are important measures, and they want to know how they do. But that's our lost leader. That's what brings people into the report. Then we try and help them understand and help ourselves understand what it is that makes for a better life for people all over the world. And then, of course, the countries that have been high for a long time, and I salute the Nordic countries, which always been in the top 5. I used to say, because remember, they switched. Switzerland was first once, Norway's been first, Denmark's been first. They're all in the first league. So you don't spend all your time looking at one of them. You then start asking what kinds of things are going on there. You don't all move there. We did find that the happiest immigrants of the world are the ones who've come to Finland. So it isn't that, this is open for everybody. But the moral is not to all move to Finland. The moral is to learn what it is about relating to each other. And it's all human, it's all social, it's primarily local, it's not driven mainly by national policies, and help people to understand that. And that's especially true in explaining these results this year, which I can get back to when you want me to.
Ambassador Ellertsdóttir, one of the things that Jon looked at is ranking by generation. And when we rank how young people feel about their lives, the top 10 changes. In fact, Lithuania becomes the number 1 country in the world. But Iceland remains high across the board. Do you have any hypotheses as to why that is?
Well, there are many reasons. And I just wanted to add to what Mikko was saying and how the Finns perceive this ranking is that humor is very important when it comes to happiness. And the Finns, their humor is very subtle, but it's there. So.
Trust her.
No, but I think for Iceland, I mean, there is a lot of issues. What the Nordics have in common is, of course, we have a well-functioning welfare system. We have access, people have access to affordable healthcare, affordable education, affordable childcare. I mean, that takes a lot of stress out of your life and makes, for better well-being. And in Iceland, and I think that's also true for the other Nordics, is that the family is very strong. The closeness, I mean, we're small countries. You don't really, I mean, here you have a family with, the mother is living in DC, the daughter in Seattle. You don't have your family in your kind of immediate, life. So, and I think that's really important. And there is a kind of, old and young are together. So, for example, in Iceland, the grandparents play a big role in helping working families. Like, you can always phone, your mother-in-law and say, "Oh my God, I'm working late. Could you pick up the kids at the kindergarten?" And I think these things are very important in your overall well-being in your daily life.
You spent a lot of time now in the United States. Could we say it's almost that simple, that it's the government's role helping with healthcare and also strong family ties that explains the difference between Iceland and the United States?
I mean, there's a lot of other things, of course. I also think smallness is strength. It's less difficult to, for example, implement policies on parental leave, on childcare in a small country like Iceland or even in Finland than it is for the United States. I mean, the bigness is a problem, sort of, I would say here, even I'm not analyzing this, but I think it makes things a lot more complicated, I would say. And I would also like to add the nearness to nature. I mean, that's so important to all our lives. I mean, just to go out, on a Saturday morning, go walk by the ocean or go into the mountains. I mean, that's a big part of our life and a lot of free time.
Ambassador Pitteloud, world leaders rely on a number of indicators, GDP per capita, unemployment. Do you and your leadership team look to these indicators for anything?
Of course we do, and the indicators we look at are the ones where the Nordic countries and Switzerland are consistently leading, which is the level of education, the PISA ranking, the access to health, the access to, but I will come back to it a little bit later. But try and imagine it's a Monday morning in Zurich, it's in the winter, it's rainy, you're in your car in the traffic, and it's miserable, and you know that you have to fill your tax returns by next week. And then you hear that Gallup has ranked Switzerland amongst the happiest countries on earth, together with Finland, where they have 6 months of darkness. And you go like, how can it be? How can it be? Because you don't feel terribly happy in your car, and you feel miserable. But that's when you start thinking about what happiness really means. And I'm looking at the map, and I'm looking at the region where I lived, which is East Africa. And I see in dark blue South Sudan. Happiness is first of all feeling safe. It's feeling safe for you, for your family, for your life, and not feeling threatened all the time or in other countries I've been living in the region, it's feeling safe from the predatory civil servant who will come to ask you for money, otherwise they will close down your business. It's feeling safe because you know that your kid will have something to eat tomorrow morning. It's feeling safe because if your kid falls ill, you know that there will be a hospital nearby and they will take the kid. This is the kind of, it's predictability, it's feeling safe, and it's also a certain feeling of fairness. So you have a trust, and I would like to underline what Mikko said, it's trust in the institutions. As long as people can trust the institutions, they can feel terribly miserable in their car on a Monday morning in Zurich in the traffic, because you feel miserable indeed, but But there is always this feeling that you have a decent chance of succeeding, and if you don't, there will be someone to catch you up and to stop you from falling too far down. I think that's the difference. It's all humans need, first of all, predictability in their lives, and our societies. You can take any of the northern countries. We give a certain level of predictability that you find nowhere on earth.
Now, you've spent a lot of time in a number of countries, but one of the countries that might surprise a lot of people on this list in the top 30 is Saudi, and you spent a number of years there. Any observations about why the results may look that way?
I spent time in Saudi Arabia 30 years ago. It was a very different country, and I don't think that Saudi Arabia would have ranked very high on the happiness ranking back then, because it was a country that had no vision for the future. Right now, it's really impressive to see how Saudi Arabia is developing into a country that gives the young people the impression that the society is moving forward. You have new hopes. It's getting more and more, liberal. It started pretty low, but now it's getting more and more liberal. And I think it's also having a vision for the future, which makes people happy, believing that the future will be better. And people in Saudi Arabia definitely believe that the future will be better.
John, what are the biggest findings from this report?
The biggest surprise was the big drop in youth well-being in a certain set of countries. And they're mainly English-speaking countries: Canada and the United States, Australia, New Zealand, to some extent a bit in Germany, the UK a little insulated from that drop. And without there being, because we went back and said, what's true about the lives in the people 10 years ago and now in these same samples? And their lives are not that much worse by any of the conventional measures. So what's happened is there's been a change, and you see it from the other speakers. It's what you think about your life as a whole that's important. And what you think about your life as a whole reflects what you hear about the lives of others and the prospects for you and your families and your communities. I think it's true that especially these are all post-colonial societies. They're all English-speaking, and they've shared a lot of angry and fretful introspection over the last decade or so, to an extent that obviously appears to be more than in the rest of the world. Excessively so, because if the lives aren't bad, or haven't changed for the worse, but people's opinions of their lives have changed. It's all been within the last 10 years, by the way, and it's a big change, so that if you look at the two countries where the happiness of the old is higher than the happiness of the young, the two are the United States and Canada. Both 50 or more ranks different, so that the old are 50 ranks higher than the young in those rankings. And that's all happened, or most of it's happened in the last 10 years. So the bad news is it's happened. The good news is, because it's happened without fundamental changes in the life, it's clearly about something temporary and changeable, that people are down in the dumps and they're focused on what's been going wrong. They're focused on past injustices. They're focusing on competing views about who was responsible and who should fix it, instead of turning the page. And that's the whole reason why we don't have a world unhappiness report or a world misery report, focusing people on what they can do to make things better. And it turns out, because previous reports, we've gone deep into natural disasters and diseases and so on, find out when something goes wrong, people already have the best in them, but something going wrong brings out the best in them. And so they end up happier after these disasters than before. You said, how could that be? The reason is that there's something called a negativity bias that invites people to think the worst of others. It's sort of inbuilt, and it has to be fought. And so if you get negative news, and if it bleeds, it leads, and the news media has always been there, right? Bad news sells. And it does, but that doesn't mean you have to feed the market. So it turns out, if you've got an unbalanced view of the world that's more negative than the world actually is. How do we know that? Because we convinced one of the years of the Gallup poll to include the wallet question, which is, how likely is your wallet to be returned?
But before we get there, Lithuania, #1 for young people. Is there anything really fast that we can learn from that discovery?
You don't go for one country, you go for broad issues. Obviously, let's hope, we've heard already that, right? You don't want the wallet question. You have to have the wallet question, because it isn't just about the state institutions, and the ambassadors have all been saying that, but it's deeper than those state institutions. The people and their institutions reflect each other. And so when wallets were experimentally dropped all over the world, 10 out of 10 were returned in Helsinki. And that's why people, when we had these data for the whole world, we found out, well, people much, much happier living in a society when their wallet would be returned. But what else did we find when we actually dropped wallets in 50 countries and more? That people systematically all over the world underestimate other people's benevolence and generosity. So of course they're less happy, because what makes you happy is the expected generosity and benevolence of others, not what actually happens. So we know that people are being fed by each other, by this negativity bias, by the conventional media, a false view about the humanity of others.
Let me ask Ambassador Hautala about that, because fostering trust in institutions is this elusive thing that every country wants, but it exists in Finland. Can you talk more about that?
Well, obviously, I think it has something to do with the kind of the culture and how people actually act as individuals. The wallet issue, my father, when I was a kid, he lost his wallet twice. He was always bicycling and it dropped from his back pockets, and both cases he got it back. So I think it's been part of the culture that people usually trust that the other person does the right thing. Not always, but in most cases. Of course, this creates a kind of fun. Also, I think my country is even absurdly law-abiding country. Even the crazy rules are obeyed because the kind of obeying the rules and playing by the rules is so high on the kind of priority list that people are, I mean, if you go to even a small place in Finland, there are some street lights. You go there 3 a.m. at night and it's red, so pedestrians quite often they still wait. There's absolutely no movement anywhere, and it feels this is absolutely crazy thing to do. But you know, as a Finn, also I stop like it doesn't. There's some bigger hand holding me, and I don't know what it is, but this kind of inner norms of culture they play a big role. On the youth aspect, I think we were actually dropping pretty badly with regards to the young people, and I think basically, as you said, it can't be explained by the actual life these people are. I mean, because there's no, I think if you are a young person without health problems, whatever, I think you have basically unlimited opportunities in real life. But I think the conceptions and the ideas about the expectations for the future, they have changed. So I think, like I said, we are not at war, but we live in the shadow of the war. And of course, for a young person, this is a completely new thing. We have a generation who's basically born since the breakup of the Soviet Union after the Cold War. So this is kind of a new thing. And since it's a new thing, it's kind of uncertain. It really increases the unpredictability. And like Jacques said, kind of lowering this unpredictability is the key thing here. Secondly, I think our big problem is actually demographics. So I think
Ambassador, I just want to pivot because it looks like we're already at time. But I just want to move to Ambassador Ellertsdóttir on one quick question, because one of the most concerning trends in this report is the global rise of negative emotions. More than ever before, people are reporting more anger, stress, sadness, worry, and pain. But it's not true in Iceland. Is there anything that the world can learn from Iceland? And is there anything that we should be concerned about as leaders about this global rise of negative emotions?
I mean, I think it's something we have to consider. And I mean, even in Iceland, I mean, the climate crisis, I mean, young people are very concerned. I mean, so, but we are different from the Finns. we're not very obedient people. We sometimes, we are called the Italians of the North, we don't really, clocks and, things like.
Cross the street.
Exactly,
Yeah.
when our Finnish friends tell us something is happening in week 16, we have no clue what that is. And I mean, I think sort of this kind of relaxed attitude to life and the future and the many possibilities people feel they have without any, burden of, where you're born or who your parents are or whatever, that it sort of, like, I know a lot of young people, I have 4 kids, so I meet a lot of young people, and they are very, they're not so worried about their careers or their life. They just want to be in the now, sort of. So I think that explains it a little bit. But they can be that because they have all the base, they have the welfare system, they have the free education, they have, they don't have to worry about all these big things. So they can be a bit frivolous.
Ambassador Pitteloud, final word. There is a lot of concerning information in this report. What exists that we can be hopeful about with respect to happiness?
I would say about the United States of America, this country should be actually leading the pack, because if you look at all the indicators, this country is right now leading the revolution that's going to transform the 21st century. So, but you have such a negative narrative from both sides of the political spectrum. From the left about all the things, all the sins you have to atone for, and from the right because this country is not anymore what it used to be. I guess it has to do with your Puritan roots that you feel so good about feeling bad about yourselves. So frankly, the US would rightfully deserve to be much further up the ranking, because this is still a country where, ask any immigrant in this country and how they think about the United States, not the established people that are at the Gallup building this morning, but any immigrant, and they have the kind of optimism that this society has lost. So maybe be a little bit less Puritan.
Coming from a Swiss.
I'm a Catholic. Hey, come on.
Well, congratulations to all 3 of them, ambassadors, especially to Finland, on again being #1 in the world. And also, if you don't mind, if you could please give John Helliwell has spent seriously most of his life producing this report, and it's thanks to him that it's done, and it's done in such an incredible way. So, John, from all of us at Gallup and everyone in this room, thank you. Thank you.